Because I grew up in a haunted house, it makes me believe that Bloomfield is not haunted because I can tell the difference. And so if you guys didn't see my last video, which was ghost story number 1, this is ghost story number 2. The farm that I grew up in Spotsylvania County in Chancellorsville, Virginia, was incredibly haunted. Apparently there was 3 different battles that happened that were 10,000 men during the Civil War were completely ambushed, and it was a bloody battle. It was near the Wilderness Battlefield Church. You guys can look it up. It's now stop number 8 on the Civil War driving tour in Fredericksburg area. So anyway, that house was incredibly haunted. Somebody asked earlier, did I know at the time that the Civil War had been fought there? Well, of course we did, but we didn't have Google in the 70s and 80s. We didn't have that information at our field trips, at our fingertips to be able to say how many people died here and what happened here. You'd have to go to the history books. And, you know, I was 8 and to 14 when I lived in that house, and I wasn't really interested in all of that. So I never really did a deep dive, even though people would come up metal detecting all the time onto the farm and they would find all kinds of things. And that's a story I'm going to tell you guys later. But across the street, sorry, I have the flu. Across the street was this place called Stars and Bars. And it was this basically a shop where people would go and sell the bullets they found, the belt buckles they found, the buttons they found, the Confederate and Union buttons, because it was a huge convergence on both sides at that point. Anyway, so back to the ghost story. This is our farm, okay? And this house is now torn down and it's now part of the Park Service. So on the farm, we had a tiny little house. This is the tiny little house. And my dad wanted to convert it and rent it out and let people come and live there, obviously, because you're going to rent it out. Duh. I was in there one sunny, beautiful day, you guys. It was at springtime. You know, if you're from the East Coast, northern East Coast, you kind of know, like, it's your first warm day and all the hay was blowing and the sun was out and the skies were blue. And I was in that little carriage house, that little cottage house. And I was walking around and my dad had taken a wall down and we were fixing it up and cleaning it up. And I looked up in the ceiling in the kitchen and there was one of those little square spots where you could push up the plywood and climb up into the attic there. So I climbed up onto, I was probably 9 at this point. I climb up onto the countertop and I start to push on the ceiling as much as I can. It was still pretty far up there for me. And all of a sudden I hear my dad's boots walk in the front door. Now it's a straight shot house. You walk in the front door, you've got the living room, dining room, you have 1 bedroom, then the kitchen, and then a bedroom over here. And that was it. Bathroom straight back porch, go outside. So I'm in this little tiny room, the kitchen at the end. And so I'm like, Dad, and I'm standing up on the counter. I'm like, come help me push this up. Let's go up in the attic. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And Dad, and then the boots stop mid-house. Like the footsteps just stop mid-house. And I'm like, Dad. So I jump off the counter and I poke my head out and I look down the corridor of the house and there was nobody there. Front door is wide open as I'd left it. It was sunny out. You could hear the birds, the wind, not a soul in that house. I'm like, Dad. And so I walk through the whole house and it's not big, you know, it's a tiny little house. And I look in each room and there was nobody there. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I book it down to the barn and my dad is down there with welding glasses on, the whole thing. And he's working on something in the barn. And I'm like, oh my God. And I Dad, were you just up at the small house? And he was like, no, I haven't been up there at all, Kim. I'm like, I just heard boots walk in. He goes, that's nothing. I hear them in the main house all the time. And I'm like, you do? Because I'd never heard them in the main house. Anyway, to this day, I will never forget what a beautiful, sunny, amazing, gorgeous day it was. And then those boots. And I can still hear them in my head. And it was a cadence. It was a heavy boot. It was a heavy walker. And it was like, doom, 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 doom. And then it stopped right when I said, Dad. So it doesn't need to be a spooky haunted house. And that land was so haunted. It was the land, everything around that farm. It wasn't just the house. It was the land and the energy. Anyway, there's story time number 2.